Well, the final international break of the calendar year is almost here. But first, we have got match day 16 in the championship. And today, we are going to give our predictions for all 12 matches, tell you a little bit about why. And of course, hopefully you guys will do the same as well. As always, please do get involved in your numbers. Give me your score predictions down in the comments. And if you beat or match my score, you will get a shout out in the next recap, which will be the first fixture list after the international break. Also, we will reflect on the midweek one today as well, as we've got a match day and a bonus game to reflect on. Very quickly though, a couple of quick plugs. We've had 2 Championship Manager specials this week. Both of those are up in the eye above. We've also had our Premier League preview for United Luton yesterday, as well as score predictions there, which are also in the eye above. But before we go and get into our match day 16 predictions, let's have a quick look back as always at last weekend. And I think it's fair to say it was an absolute stinker for all of us because there weren't many easy games to predict. There were a few that got away from us very late on. And overall, only 2 people managed to beat me, despite the fact I only got 7 points. And even then, nobody got double figures this time around. The biggest problem was that perfect scores were hard to come by. Lots of low-scoring games where we expected higher ones, and certainly a few thrillers where we expected low-scoring games. A lot of the games went completely against the law of averages, and that is why we all love the championship. If you're here, as I mentioned a couple of times in the comments in the week, for serious tips or competition and don't just want to have a bit of fun, then it's probably not the right place for you because I make no bones about it. We're having a bit of fun. But 2 of you that did have a bit of fun and managed to beat my point score were Carl and Mitchell. Carl, a first-time player, got 8 points, including a perfect score for Rotherham. Mitchell got 8 points as well. I think when I wrote the comments responding to you both, I thought I'd got 8 points as well. I didn't. I got 7, so you both beat me. I got a perfect score for Blackburn's 3-1 win at Norwich, 4 other correct outcomes, and a couple of other frustrating ones that were very close calls. Let's also have a quick look back at midweek as well, where one person correctly predicted a draw. That man was David, who went for 1 apiece, but you were the only person to get the correct outcome, so well done to you. But with that out of the way, let's move on to match day 16. Let's hope it's a bit more predictable and that we all get a slightly higher score. We start on Friday night with a big game up in the northwest. It is Blackburn Rovers versus Preston North End, and Blackburn got a good 3-1 win at Norwich, my perfect score prediction. Preston surprised everyone by being involved in one of the thrillers of the week. There was also a slightly dodgy penalty call between Preston and Coventry, but overall a good 3-2 win for them, a crucial win after a long winless run which keeps them in the playoff places too. And to be fair, it was an even game. It could have gone either way, but Preston maybe did have the slightly better chances. Let's talk about Blackburn though, because they are a bit of an enigma in this championship season. They've really struggled when they've played against low defensive blocks. They've created chances galore when they've been counter-attacking, but it's been completely hit and miss whether they take them on a game-by-game basis. And in this one, after 2 blanks, they got a brilliant 3 goals at Norwich. They were really good, and despite a red card, they still hung on very comfortably. And it makes this game hard to predict because you've got a Preston side that are usually very tight, very tidy, and maybe not the most aggressive on the road, but they were in a thriller last week. And you've got a Blackburn side who create chances galore, like to open teams up, but struggle against a low block and have been hit and miss in front of goal recently. It's also a Blackburn side that very rarely keeps clean sheets, which makes that quite difficult to judge as well. So as a result of that, and because Preston have got back to winning ways, despite the fact I think Blackburn will have the better of the game, I'm going to go for a smash and grab 1-0 away win. I think Preston might nick it, and as a result, on a hunch, I'm going to go for 1-0 to them. The second game is the early kickoff on Saturday, and it does not get any easier for Wayne Rooney. His Birmingham City side travelled to Sunderland, and both sides drew their game last weekend. Sunderland a 0-0 draw at Swansea in a very strange game. And it feels weird saying this because you don't often get to. Sunderland were massively harmed by Swansea's early red card. They were dominating the game till that point. They were brilliant. They were rampant. They were doing what Sunderland do on the counter-attack, which is just tearing teams apart, as we saw so often last year in the Championship. After the red card, Swansea changed their tact a bit. Sunderland found it a little harder to get in, and more importantly, were led to an alien game, which was dominating the ball, having it 25, 30, 35 yards out, but still facing 8 or 9 defenders in front of them. And that's why you saw the match stats that you did, with 25 shots but just 3 on target, because Sunderland didn't have that little bit of guile and cutting edge to break through Swansea. And in the end, they didn't create that many glorious chances, despite absolutely dominating the game. So they probably should have nicked it. They probably should have been ahead before the red card. But in the end, they were probably quite happy given the penalty as well. So not a bad result for them. For Birmingham, it was very positive for 80 minutes, wasn't it? A 2-0 lead against Ipswich Town, and they threw it away. Defensively, not quite as good. I mean, they were second best for the most part. They gave up a lot of possession. They played a bit more on a counter-attack. Dare I say it? They looked a bit more like John Eustace's side playing that way, rather than the attacking possession-based football we were maybe expecting to see under Rooney. But overall, against the side up in second place, it was a much improved performance. And in the end, just the frustration that they couldn't hold on and couldn't see out the victory from a very strong position late on. It is a point on the board for Wayne Rooney, though. It is an improved performance. But away to Sunderland is going to be a tricky day. Sunderland, as we saw, struggle with the way Birmingham used to set up away from home. If you sit behind the ball, if you get 8 or 9 defensive players in the final third, it's hard to break down. Sunderland are ruthless on the counter-attack though. And if Birmingham come out, they fly the fullbacks forward, they push midfielders on, Sunderland will pick them off. And I'm going to bank on that happening because it's sort of what we saw against Southampton. Whether or not it will play out that way, I don't know. Whether or not Rooney will adapt for this game, I'm not sure. But based on what we've seen and the evidence so far under Rooney and what we've seen from Sunderland for the most part, I am going to go for the host to win this one, almost playing like they would away from home. I'm going to go for Sunderland to win comfortably by 3-1. Let's move on to the 3 p.m. kickoffs, and we start with an informed team v an out-of-form team. Cardiff have only lost 1 of their last 5, and they host Norwich City, who have lost 4 in a row. In the process, Norwich have conceded 11 goals in those 4 games, and they've been a bit all over the shop, to be honest. No win in the last 6, sliding massively, missing Josh Sargent in front of goal, and missing the defenders this old on deadline day. They're the only team to concede 30 goals in the league this season. That is an average of 2 a game. And for Cardiff, very much the opposite. 7 points from 9, 3 successive clean sheets, and floating just outside the playoffs, which I don't think any of us expected. 16 goals conceded, one of the better defensive records in the league. And it's very hard to see anything other than a Cardiff winning this one. Norwich, to be fair to them, always seem to score goals at the minute. So I wouldn't bank against them ending the run of Cardiff clean sheets, but Cardiff have surprised me in so many. They've been pretty strong defensively at home all season, and even now away from home, they've taken advantage in their last couple of games. And while the goal threat is a little bit hit and miss, you see them scoring a 2 and a 4, but then with blanks either side. Defensively, you know they're going to be all right. I will bank on Norwich to get 1, but I'm going to edge a Cardiff win, and I think, unfortunately, if the result plays out that way, it might be a difficult international break for David Wagner. I'm going to go for 2-1 to Cardiff City. Unfortunately, it may lead to another manager special. The next game is Coventry City versus Stoke City. Coventry make it 4 defeats in a row and slide down to 20th place in the Championship. They did manage to get goals against Preston, and there was a bizarre penalty decision in that game. However, it was a very poor defensive display, and that is the thing we're not used to seeing so much from Coventry City. They've conceded 8 in their last 4, 7 in their last 3, and when you combine that with a pretty average attacking record, it's not a good start for them. However, they started poorly last year. They picked up. They're a club that loses 2, 3 or 4 players every summer. They lost Gyökeres and Hamer, and they're rebuilding. And the positive sign from last weekend is that Haji Wright got a couple of goals. They look more of a threat going forward. It's just about combining it. And if they stick with Mark Robbins, which I'm sure they will, they'll be absolutely fine in a few weeks' time. For Stoke, a brilliant couple of weeks. 3 clean sheets in a row. 10 points from their last 4 games. And when you consider that they were against Sunderland, Leeds, Borough and Cardiff, who are all in the top half, I think they've got to be pretty pleased with that outcome, haven't they? They're going to be tough to beat, but you know with Stoke, based on what we've seen in the last 3 years, there's always a disaster around the corner. They are the second most inconsistent team to predict, and I just wonder if this is going to be their bad day. I can see Coventry trying to be a bit more gritty. I can see it being a very poor game to watch, if I'm honest, but I'm going to bank on Coventry to nick it. I just think the tide's going to turn. We saw it with the Preston game last week. Preston got their first win in ages. I'm going to go for Coventry to get their first win in 6. And by the same method they did against Blackburn, a gritty home 1-0 victory. Let's move on to the game at the MKM, which is Hull City versus Huddersfield Town. Fair play to Huddersfield first and for all. They are ravaged by injuries and players out. Only 6 substitutes named against Watford, and they had to play in a very different way to the way that Darren Moore would like. And they still managed to get a 0-0 draw, which is a really good effort in the circumstances. So you can't judge too much on Huddersfield's form. Of the 6 subs they could name, 3 of them were youngsters. They only had one recognised striker who had not been a regular at Championship level. They're really going to struggle for goals at the minute. So Darren Moore's probably going to have to be patient for another week. And he is a man who probably cannot wait for the international break to come along, because after it, he'll have a few players back and I'm sure they'll start to pick up again. For this one, though, Hull picked up a good home win last time before disappointment at West Brom. Well, they had been better on the road generally this year, but it was just a bit of an off day for them defensively. Overall, it's been a very decent start to the season. They're making progress and their last home performance was a good one against Preston. And against the Huddersfield side that is truly down to the bare bones. I can only see one winner in this game, I'm afraid. Don't judge Darren Moore till after the international break when hopefully a few are back. But for now, Hull City are going to win this game. For me, be a routine, comfortable win. I'm going to go by 2-0. Let's move on to a game that promises to be a bit of a thriller, as every game is at Portman Road. It is Ipswich Town versus Swansea City. Ipswich at home always means goals for and against. And at the moment, so do their away games, because in a turn of events, they've had back-to-back 2-2 draws, away at Birmingham City, where they came back from 2 down, and away at Rotherham, where they were incredibly frustrated late on after thinking they'd won it in the 87th minute. They probably should have had a penalty in that game as well. For Swansea, a gritty 0-0 draw at home to Sunderland. They should have been behind, they were pasted before Patino's red card. And after that, fair play to them, they adapted, they played in a more defensive shape and structure, and they got a result, which was an incredible effort for 60 minutes with 10 men. They also made it back-to-back clean sheets, but not many come to Portman Road and achieve that. I've got a feeling this is going to be goals galore, because Swansea's last 3 games have been low scoring, they're due one, and every game for Ipswich is one at home. So I'm going to go for a thriller. I am going to go for Ipswich to pip it, but I could see it going either way. I'm going to go for 3-2 to the home side, but I'm a little worried about their defensive form recently. They're starting to let in a few more poorer goals, and they'll be hoping that trend doesn't continue. But either way, I'm going for Ipswich to nick it by 3-2. Let's move on to a big game at both ends of the table. It is Leeds United versus Plymouth Argyle. 2 divisions separated these sides last year, but you know what? Both sides will probably be happy with their efforts last weekend. Leeds, as we predicted, got a great win away at Leicester. I did not expect a clean sheet, though I'll happily admit that. Leeds defended well, Leeds attacked brilliantly on the counter, and the game panned out how we thought. Leicester dominated the ball, Leeds were able to maintain their shape, which is something we didn't know they'd do. And in the end, on a counter-attack, they were a constant threat. They restricted Leicester to 1 shot on target and 1 great opportunity, and they always looked like they were going to score themselves. So you've got to say a massive well done to them, a great game plan. And we've said this before, Daniel Farke's teams always start slowly and they will always come back. Plymouth, on the other hand, a 3-3 draw at home to Middlesbrough. It looked good for the first half, didn't it? I thought my prediction was going to be a bit of genius. They came out for the second half and they struggled defensively, which, let's be honest, has been the Achilles heel for Plymouth this year. They've actually scored 26 goals, which, to put it into perspective, only the top 2 have got more this year. But defensively, they are one of the worst records in the league, and that is why they are down near the bottom of the table. But all of this talk, particularly in the manager specials this week, about progressive managers and playing better football, the teams with the best defensive records will always be the ones near the top in the Championship. Last year proved it yet again, and for some reason teams don't learn. But for Plymouth, they're competitive, they're fighting hard. I genuinely do hope they stay up, mainly because if Luton come down, I want to go to Home Park next year. But they're doing really decently. They've got to be wary because a few of those teams below have appointed new managers now. But overall, they've been strong at home. They've struggled a lot more on the road. We saw against Ipswich they were a bit more competitive, but when they came out, they were attacked easily. And Leeds at home have been rampant recently. They won against Bristol City. They were fantastic against Huddersfield and even gritted one out against a defensive QPR. So I think this one is going to be a comfortable home win. I could see Plymouth getting a goal on the counter. And overall, this is a free hit for them. It's not a game that's going to define whether they survive or not. So I'm going to go for Leeds United to win by 3-1. And Plymouth will turn their attentions to their home form after the international break. Let's move on to what was expected to be a big game at the top. But at the moment, the hosts are sitting in mid-table. It is Middlesbrough versus Leicester City. Leicester defeated by Leeds by 1-0. I'm not actually that worried about it because I saw that coming the way both sides played. Leicester will be far better suited to how Middlesbrough normally play at home unless Michael Carrick springs a surprise. And I'm sure they won't lose 2 in a row. But even if they do, they've got a massive cushion at the moment, so it doesn't matter. The one thing for Leicester perhaps is whether they can turn some of those defeats into draws. Yet to draw a game this season, the only team in the Championship not to. Last year the record was Blackburn, who it took till the 28th game. Will Leicester match that this year? Middlesbrough, a 3-3 draw against Plymouth after a 3-2 win against Exeter, a 2-0 defeat at home to Stoke, and a 2-1 win at Norwich. They are in mixed form. They've definitely improved after their poor start to the season. They've picked up lots of victories and they've started to show a regular goal threat, which is the thing that had been missing from their new look attack. The big problem though is defensively. They had picked up a couple of clean sheets over the turn of the last international break, but it's been a problem for them for the most part this year. They've let in 23 goals, which is the joint second worst record in the top half, and that against Leicester is potentially problematic. Overall, I think both sides will be wary of each other's threats. I think Leicester will have more of the ball. I think Middlesbrough will counter a bit more. But ultimately, I do think both sides will cancel each other out. And in the end, I'm going to go for a Championship's favourite scoreline of 1-1, which I think both teams will be pretty happy with. 4 to go now, and we move on to a battle of the new managers. And in fact, we've got 2 games in a row where that's the case. It is Queen's Park Rangers versus Bristol City. It is Martí Cifuentes versus Liam Manning. And both sides come into this one with a decent result off the last weekend. QPR got a 1-1 draw at Rotherham, but I don't think that tells the full story. Yes, disappointing to not win a game, but a much better performance. The fans were happy. Ilias Chair was starting to star again, and a few of the other key players that maybe you would consider to be more technically proficient have become important in their displays. Willock got 80 minutes. Dykes was linking up as well. Dixon Bonner always looking a threat. They've got a good side in there. They've got to be better defensively, and they've got to be more consistent. But if that was a sign of things to come, I think it will perhaps be a more positive one for QPR. They've got to take advantage of Loftus Road. As we mentioned in that manager special, they've got a real opportunity if they get on the front foot and win their first game at home to turn that ground back into a fortress. But Bristol City have got a brand new manager bounce. After a 1-0 win against Sheffield Wednesday to finish the interim management spell, it is Liam Manning, who comes from high-flying Oxford in League One, to take on this job in the Championship. Bristol City were made to wait against Wednesday. The early red card for Barry Bannon made it a frustrating game of attack v defence, but they did get the breakthrough. They were good on the ball and eventually got the victory. However, they were very susceptible to the counter-attack, and Wednesday had a couple of chances to actually win the game. So not the best performance for them, but they did pick up 3 points. I've genuinely no idea what to go for in this one. Ultimately, you could see both sides making defensive errors, but you're going to see 2 managers who don't want to lose. QPR won't want to lose their first home game under a new manager. Bristol City won't want to lose their first game under a new manager. And you've got 2 sides that have got managers now who want to be more progressive, want to keep the ball. Are we actually going to see a quite boring game where 2 teams cancel each other out? That's what I'm banking on. So cue the thriller of the week, but I'm going to go for a 1-0 home win. I think QPR will grit one out. They need it as well because they're second bottom and they're 6 points adrift. I think they're going to nick it 1-0. In truth, we don't really know what to expect from either side. I don't think it's going to be a great game. Let's move on to another new game between 2 new managers that I put in this category. It is Sheffield Wednesday versus Millwall at Hillsborough. Sheffield Wednesday at home got their first victory against Rotherham in the last home fixture. However, Barry Bannon now out, not pulling the strings due to his red card, might make things a bit trickier for Danny Roll. Millwall, however, as we mentioned the other day, are managed by a man who has never managed a senior game as a head coach. Joe Edwards makes his managerial debut in this one. He's managed England under-20s and been in a coaching setup at several big clubs. But does he have the man management skills to manage a championship club? We'll find out the answer as we go along. I can see this being quite a cagey game as well. Sheffield Wednesday have got to keep it tighter defensively. In Danny Roll's last 2 games, they've done that. Against Rotherham, they were really good. And against Bristol City, the early red card forced their hand. But they did still look a counter-attacking threat. And to be fair, they defended pretty well for the most part. Millwall, disappointment at home to Southampton. 5 games without a victory. They've conceded in all of them. And that's the first time they hadn't scored. But so far not improved since Gary Rowett had left. I'm intrigued to see what happens under Joe Edwards. We talked a bit on Monday about whether the squad suits his style at the minute, or his perceived style, but he has since hinted in press conferences that he's not going to change the style too much till January. So I think that might make things a little easier. Again, the key for him will be in avoiding defeat in his first game in management, probably trying to improve the defensive efforts as well. For Sheffield Wednesday, they've got to pick up points. They're 9 points adrift, they've only won one game, and their home form is going to be crucial in bouncing back. But they just don't score enough goals. 7 in 15 games is a pathetic return. 2 of those came in the home win against Rotherham. I'm going to go for them to get 1 in this game. I don't think they're going to get the win they need. I'm going to go for 1 goal apiece, the Championship's favourite scoreline, and we really don't know what to expect from Joe Edwards, so that could be right or horribly wrong. Let's move on to the big game at St Mary's. It is Southampton versus West Bromwich Albion. West Brom are starting to hit their stride now. They're up to 5th after 3 straight wins, 4 games undefeated, and 3 clean sheets in that spell as well. They beat Hull by 3-1 last weekend in a pretty ruthless and efficient display. They just look so much like Corberán's Huddersfield team now, it's remarkable. It's 3 very good wins in the space of a week. But Southampton away, you could argue based on the table, is by far the toughest challenge they've had in a while. This is a Southampton team that we have to be fair to because Russell Martin was getting pelters, he was conceding goals left, right and centre, and you could argue a lot of fans wanted him to be close to the sack. But he's picked up a clean sheet in a big 1-0 win away at Millwall. Not a great game, not the most exciting, and of course a very late winner, which was the hallmark of their early weeks of the season. They dominated the ball, they've created plenty of chances, and in the end they probably deserved to win it. So good for them to get another victory and keep pace with Leeds and West Brom up in those playoff places. It is now 6 unbeaten as well. It's been a really good month for them. Can they carry it on into the international break? I can see this being a pretty poor game. I think we can all see how it's going to pan out. Southampton will have 75 to 80% of the ball. West Brom will play like Corberán's Huddersfield and now Corberán's West Brom. They will try and hit them on the counter, and they'll try and force Southampton to shoot from distance and force a worldie in. In my opinion, this one has the hallmarks of being the surprise of the weekend. I've not actually gone for an away win the whole of Saturday, only the Friday night game with Preston, but I'm going to break the trend in this one. There is every chance that this could play out into a 1-1 draw, and I could have gone safe again. But I'm not going to sit on the fence. I think West Brom might nick this, and I'm going to go for an ugly 1-0 away win. Hitting Southampton on the counter, pressing a mistake, and then frustrating them in front of their own fans. I can see it playing out now. It's what Huddersfield did when they got to the playoffs under him, and I wouldn't be shocked if it happened this time. So 1-0 West Brom for me. And the final game before the international break is at Vicarage Road. It is Watford versus Rotherham United. Watford frustrated at Huddersfield, playing against an incredibly depleted side that didn't have a recognised striker at the end of the game, only had 6 subs including 3 youth players. They'll be really annoyed they didn't score in that one. They didn't create an awful lot as well, which has been a problem at times this year. They've had spells where they've gone and been poor defensively but been able to attack. But generally, a lack of attacking threat has defined their season, and if they did have a goal scorer in that team, they'd probably be up in the playoff mix in truth, because defensively they're not bad at all. They come up against a Rotherham side who are useless away from home. We've mentioned it several times this season. Their only point came at Southampton, where they were absolutely battered. They were poor at Sheffield Wednesday. They were fortunate to get a draw against QPR, and they were spirited against Ipswich, but we've never doubted their home form. They fight hard at home, they pick up points, they don't often lose. However, on the road, they have been abysmal defensively. It's not the fact that they've lost most of the games, they've lost them pretty comfortably in the end. And the one at Sheffield Wednesday against a side who hadn't won all season in a Yorkshire derby was a pretty telling performance for me. So despite Watford's struggles in front of goal, I think they'll win this one pretty comfortably. I'm going to go for Watford to win by 2-0. And Rotherham, they've got to find a way to adapt on the road, or this is going to be a very difficult season. For now though, with those predictions out the way, let's have a quick recap of what I've gone for. I've gone for a surprise on Friday night with Preston to win 1-0 at Blackburn in a Lancashire derby. And then the same surprise on a Saturday with a 1-0 away win. This time for West Brom to nick one at Southampton. I've gone for QPR to get their first win under Martí Cifuentes and Leicester to go 2 without a win for the first time this season. But those are just my predictions. Do you agree or disagree? Let me know yours in the comments below. If you beat or match my score, as always, you'll get a shout out in the next recap when we return after the international break. In the meantime, we've got several manager specials which you can check out in the eye above from the last couple of weeks. And we've also got the Premier League predictions for the weekend, which were released yesterday. We'll be carrying on with the League One fixtures through the international break too. We've got an interview with a Luton legend on the way. But if you enjoyed this one, please do put a thumbs up on it, subscribe and turn that notification bell on to stay up to date with all the things I've just mentioned. And thank you very much for watching as always. Enjoy your game this weekend, and I'll see you back here in a couple of weeks as we return after the international break.